Amon Dejdakas, Bowie Wadami Anishinaabe Kwandao. I'm Alexa Dawson. I am a citizen Potawatomi from Oklahoma, but I'm currently living in Kansas. Um, and I'm a musician and a founder of a nonprofit, and I work in a community a lot, serve on a couple boards. And yeah, that's about it for now. I'm sure we'll get into more.
That's amazing, Alexa. It's so nice to have you on. Thank you so much. Maybe for our listeners who are not familiar with what Citizen Potawatomi Nation is, explain that. And the movie is about Billy Caldwell, who led the Prairie Band, eventually lived with the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation. So maybe if you could explain the difference so people that are not familiar with the history might have a better understanding.
Sure. So the Citizen Band and Prairie Band were together for a while in Kansas. And I'm not a historian, but I can kind of give you my understanding of what's gone on. So there was a choice to the tribe was being moved. They were being removed from places that they had been removed to, out of Michigan and Iowa, and so um, the in Illinois and all around that area. Um, so they had all been moved to this place, but then the railroad needed to go coincidentally right through where they had been told to go. So they were being offered more land in common to hold in common there in Kansas, or they were being offered allotments as private property. And allotments aren't exactly private property. That's a different kind of story, um, but it did mean, and I think most of those who took the allotments understood it to mean that they would have their own land and they wouldn't be moved around anymore. Um, so that was a choice that they made and moved to Kansas. This also was the deal was sweetened by the promise of U.S. citizenship. So many of the Potawatomi that were there in Kansas at that time did not have U.S. citizenship at that time. So as I understand it, that was sort of the divide between the Citizen Potawatomi or the Mission Band and what's known as the Prairie Band today. So yeah.
And as I understand, when the Potawatomi were in the Great Lakes region, they were Potawatomi. And it wasn't until after the Indian removal period where different bands or tribes would separate and go different places. And that's where they received their individual name as the federally recognized tribes that we know today. So the Citizen Band Potawatomi is in Shawnee, Oklahoma. The Prairie Band Potawatomi is in Mayetta, Kansas. We have the Forest County Potawatomi that are up north in Wisconsin, the
Mm-hmm.
Pokagon Potawatomi, which are in Michigan. So tribes didn't have their individual names until really after the removal period.
That may or may not be true. I think that part of it. Sorry, my bird is really going to be loud and talk. I don't know how loud she is in this.
I can't hear it in the
Okay,
video.
great. There's something about the pitch. I can hear it and you can't. Okay. Um, the Potawatomi groups, as far as I understand, the way that we lived in history, were very closely related. First of all, with the Odawa and the Ojibwe people as well, and so the Anishinaabe people, the Three Fires Confederacy, had many places there in around the Great Lakes and did live in somewhat autonomous collectives. If I might not be saying the political thing right, but you know, I find it amusing when a lot of people who study this sort of thing say that in order to live in harmony with the land, we need to be living in communities of like 150 people in these, groups. And I'm like, guess what? Somebody was doing that. They were doing that, and I think that's really cool. That's history that I'm not exactly well read on, and I just kind of know what I've heard from others who have studied this history. Um, but yeah, as far as I know, there wasn't just one big huge group. They were definitely spread all over, and they probably did identify themselves with names, but I'm not really sure at this point like
Interesting.
how that would have. been done. So,
Well, for sure, there was a community around the Great Lakes, and
hmm
the Billy Caldwell story. You can see the map from behind me. This is his trail. He
hmm
was up in, his mother was from northern upstate New York and eventually moved up into Canada. And then you can see the dotted line. He moved from the Niagara area through Chicago and then through Iowa down to St. Joseph, Missouri for a little while and then up to Council Bluffs. But then your tribe's trail leads from Council Bluffs down to Oklahoma. So down south of Kansas and through Oklahoma. So
yeah, from Indiana and Chicago, you have a lot of, there's a little bit of splintering, and then kind of a regathering back together in Kansas. So that's my family was in Council Bluffs. I think both the OG and the Bobian families went to Council Bluffs. I'm not 100% sure. But I know the OGs. I'm not sure about the Bobians, but I do know that the OGs were in Council Bluffs with Billy Caldwell in that group. Hmm
that's right. You had mentioned that before. I had forgotten that the OG family, and then
hmm
the Bobian. That's a historic name that I've seen in research in Detroit and in Canada and Chicago, and so I look forward to talking about that. So, I the story the story is always bigger than you can even imagine, and the
hmm
history is so deep, and it's hard to imagine all all the stories over centuries, that the Great Lakes area have had. And so what I find interesting is how you and I met. Do you remember how we started?
I think that somebody shared that there was going to be a documentary about Billy Caldwell or that it was in progress. And I think I just like looked you up and emailed you a link to some music. And then I think it was the same day you wrote me back and was like, I want these two songs for the film. And I was like, oh my God, okay, well, this is great.
I, and that's how this journey has been for me over the past 30 years, just people reaching out with an idea or a suggestion, or in your case, you reached out, you sent this email. I remember I was in my house. It was some afternoon. I was laying down on the couch and the email popped up and I read it and I started listening to your songs and it was so haunting to me. And it was just such a connection and the idea that you, as a Potawatomi woman, but also with this connected history to the Great Lakes region and connected history to the Billy Caldwell story, I was so honored, Alexa. And so, the last, I think, 3 years now we've known each other, to learn more about you and your history and your music and everything your gardening that you're doing and everything you're doing. I mean, you're just such a beautiful soul. And I just want to
Oh,
thank you for the contributions you've made and our friendship over the years.
thank you, Susan. It's been a pleasure to know you and to be a part of this and to, yeah, to through you is when I kind of found out that, oh, if I go to the Chicago Historical Museum, I can learn a lot more about my family. And I just went there last weekend actually, and I think you might have seen my video of me crying in the tiny little room that they have dedicated to like the old Chicago before Chicago, um, and in that room is Mark Bobian's violin or fiddle, and there's this well, I went to the desk and she asked if I was a student or, a resident. And I said, really, I'm just here to find one thing. And she said, well, what is it? And I told her it's this violin. And she said, I think it's on the second floor. Go look and see if it's there, So she kind of let me slip by the front desk just to see if the thing was there. And so I went up into the room and I was reading this plaque that said, we acknowledge that we're not quite getting this right, and please let us know like what you would like to see different, which I thought was interesting to have the museum have that posted. And then somebody must have like pushed this button on this exhibit because I heard the fiddle play. Like I heard, it's not him, it's not Mark Bobian, but it's the song that he was known to stand up on the table and get the crowd going with. And I I just, it really moved me just to hear just to hear the Fisherman's Reel, which was his favorite tune. And like I like fiddle tunes. I'm not a fiddler, but I do play the mandolin, so I've decided I want to learn Fisherman's Reel on the mandolin now. And then on the next or opportunity that I had, which Sunday before I left to get on the train, or no, that was like Tuesday. I don't remember what days. Tuesday. Um, I was able to go into the museum and do a little bit of research, and I found something really fascinating. The very first, um, like historical sketchbooks of Chicago. I think it was 1835 or something like that. Um, and it had all of the citizens of the Chicago Commonwealth, or I don't remember what it was at that time. And it listed Charles Beaubien. And I'm unclear whether Charles was a nephew or a brother. I thought he was a brother until very recently when I was looking at some documentation and saw otherwise. But Charles Beaubien, as you know, was known as being like a statesman. He owned the land that Fort Dearborn was on, as far as I know. Like the story goes that he had that land, and then it was called the Beaubien Tract when it got sold off after he lost it in a United States Supreme Court case. So like this idea that there was this businessman, statesman, he had all these, distinctions, and there's things named after him in Chicago, but he's listed in that historical sketch as a violin player. And I just was like, what? What's going on here? Because I'd never heard about him playing a violin or a fiddle or anything like that. So, and it was interesting that it didn't say fiddle either. And there's a big difference, if you ask. So, um, anyway, it's just been really interesting to dig a little bit deeper. And, this thanks to you, because I really just didn't know where to start looking. Um, I knew that our family was there before Chicago was there, but I didn't know any of the details. And so this has really set me on a path of discovery. And yeah, it's really cool. So thank you very much.
Oh, it's a beautiful story, Alexa, and I'm so excited to see what you dig up. I don't want the moment to pass. What you mentioned about hearing the music, the violin playing in the museum, and I can't even imagine what that connection must have felt like for you.
It was really, I haven't just been like overwhelmed like that and taken by surprise like that in a long time. It was very emotional, and even knowing like it's not him, but to be in a place where something from so long ago um, was being given just the space, and the opportunity to fill the air, like a reel does. A reel is a moving piece of work, and so just to have it on display there, the fiddle is on display, and it was in a glass case, and it was improperly strung, and I longed to touch it and to take it to a luthier and to get it fixed. And to hear someone play it, because I feel like it wants to be played. Um, but it was very interesting and very moving, and definitely pushes me to learn more and to want to find out a little bit more about what the relations were, the idea of that tavern on Wolf Point. Just I'm a little bit enamored with that concept, and it was quite interesting. I was there in part because of a board meeting for Music to Life, and Music to Life is a foundation that was co-founded by Liz Stuckey Sunday and her dad, who is Noel Paul Stuckey of Peter, Paul, and Mary. So
Oh,
I'm up in we're at this board meeting, and I'm in the building that is built like this on Wolf Point,
yep.
and I'm looking down there at that red sculpture where you took me and the kids when we came to visit, and I just it took me a second to realize, oh wait, I'm here. This is where because I hadn't like looked out that window, and just to see it from that vantage point, and you see the Chicago Y signs. My friend recently um, told me that's what that is signifying. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. The where the rivers come in together, and so it was a very like full circle moment to be in a place and in a time that is very different from that place and time, but to have some thread of connection through the years is super meaningful and just uh, it makes me very happy to see these stories be told and preserved. So yeah, thank you.
I've always said you and Sharon Hoog Stratton, who's a descendant of Archangel Wilmette, you're really Chicago royalty. I mean, you are the descendants of the founding fathers of Chicago before any colonial people got here. And that story needs to be told.
Yeah, it did surprise me in the historical museum what a small, as I said, the tiny room, what a small portion of the museum. And of course, there are a lot of really fantastic uh, exhibits at that museum, lots of traveling exhibits. And I got to see the Chicago, well, it was protest poster art, an exhibit full of poster art that was sort of like, protesty in nature. It was just really cool. And I mean, it's an amazing museum, but this one little room with like a tiny framed picture of Shabona or Shabana, and then a little tiny frame picture of Mark Bobian. And there is a big quote on the wall in there that says something about didn't think there would be no town or something to that effect. Like there wasn't a town, didn't expect there to be a town because that when that tavern was there, and I as far as I for my research, there was a ferry also that was operated by one of the relatives. It ferries in that area that were going across, and that was part of the OG enterprise, as far as I understand. But there's so much of this that's like I've read bits and pieces, and it's hard to kind of collect it all. There are some really good resources that I have, but like I have to revisit them every couple of years. I don't have a historian's brain with the dates.
No, I don't either. And I have to relook everything back up. And I'm
Mhm.
sure I'm wondering with the museum if it's a matter of making sure they get it right. You know, that the reason that room is small, the story is small right now, is that it's really important to get it right. And so we need experts with that oral history, like your family, like Sharon's family, that they can get it right.
Yeah, I mean I think that is important, and there is that principle of indigenous representation that says nothing about us without us. That's like,
Mhm.
please don't put things out there about us without our input. And so I do think that it was acknowledged by many of the workers at the museum, the employees, that this is incomplete and this is not. And even the plaque, as I said, that was there that said this is not all the whole story. So I did find it really interesting that on Mark Bobian's plaque, they called him French Creole, and I'm like, that is interesting. Like I need to go back and look at where that line may have gone, because I know that there are and were Bobians in St. Louis or in Louisiana and places like that. So um it's that's just like another rabbit trail to like chase off and to find out, was he really French Creole, or like is this a way of talking about mixed race people that they at one point documented. So yeah, there's a lot that further research required is like the big headline of everything that I know about my family history.
And and even though it's been a couple hundred years, when you're standing at that window and looking out at the Y and the river, it actually wasn't that long ago,
Right,
you know.
really.
And there are pieces out there that we can piece together. And just my experience on working with the Billy Caldwell movie is there's a lot of history out there. It's not all on Google.
Right.
You got to kind of do it the old-fashioned way and read old books and old maps. And I've seen maps with that ferry, with the OG ferry on it.
Yeah. Yeah, the history museum, in their archives and their resource center, they were very welcoming and put together a nice big list of,
Oh,
documents that I can go in and take pictures or copies of, when I visit. And so I only had about an hour and a half in there before the train was going to leave me in Chicago, so I had to kind of rush. But I did take a lot of pictures of documents that I'm going to start to, transfer over to PDFs and print out so that I can kind of like sit on the couch
mm-hmm.
and read and pick out which parts of this story I feel like need to be explored further. And that was just on the Bobian side. Like I have the whole OG files that I haven't even cracked into. So, um, yeah,
I can't
but
wait.
exciting. Yeah, it's exciting. It's
That's
kind of
awesome.
overwhelming and really interesting that the History Center has retained that much information. And it makes me want to go to Council Bluffs as well and to see what they have on.
Yeah, and the Chicago history, a lot of research, and even I live in the north suburbs, and Chicago was a place to document and keep information. So even if you lived up along the North Shore and the north suburbs, all those family trees, charts, photos, businesses were all sent down to Chicago for storage and collection.
Yeah, it's really incredible the amount of stuff that they have on file there. It's just yeah, it can get overwhelming when you're like trying to decide what it is you're even looking for. And it's really I was thinking about this on the train on the way home, like it's only in the last couple of generations that we have these kinds of, you know, records, I think. So it's interesting to think about the oral stories that were passed down before that, and then how our oral stories are being passed down even now. And um, I have a friend who passed on recently, and he liked to tell stories about here in Kansas and the Flint Hills and the Cowboys. And my last name is Dawson, my ex-husband's name, and he liked to tell a lot of stories about the Dawsons and things like that. But he said, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. So I know that that happened a lot through the generations of my family because we had some storytellers in those generations. And so, yeah, it's like these stories are they're worth keeping track of and maybe worth even a little embellishment.
Well, you talk about stories. Can you imagine the Mark Bobby and Sauganash Hotel and the stories there?
Oh my. And the travelers, the things that may have gone on in that place is really incredible. And like it's cool that they have photographs of that area, sketches. It's not photographs, I guess they're sketches of the area and the hotel, so you can kind of see what it looked like. And um somewhere in my files I have, it's kind of a menu. It's like a shot of whiskey is like point, it's like half a cent or something for a shot of whiskey, and like half a cent for a beer, and a night's lodging is like 2 cents, or I can't remember what it is, but it seems like really funny. um mo- the monetary ju- just to know how much things cost, like, kind of blows my mind a little bit. Um but yeah, all the documents say, that he liked to party. And then you think about Charles and this, like, straight laced guy. And I think about my family today and like all the different personalities, and just the realization that it's always kind of been that way. Like families have always been a mixed bag of personalities, and that, you know, there's something to that.
I love this. If people take that architectural boat tour back through the Chicago River, they will actually take both branches, the north and the south branch of the Chicago River, and see where that Y is, that Y intersection, and can see where the fort used to be and where the Sauganash Hotel used to be, and
Mm,
imagine. So Billy Caldwell had a log cabin, but his was up closer to State and Chicago Avenue. So he was a little bit north of there, you know, quarter of a mile, half a mile, and he always kind of lived on the outskirts of places. I don't know why. It's one of these 100 questions of why he did the things he did.
Yeah, I don't know. I tend to be I tend to prefer the country as well. So maybe he just liked the quiet life. I don't know.
Have you actually looked at the family tree and did the lines up to Mark Bobian? Do you have that all figured out?
Yeah, I actually do. So, my papa, Leo Roberts, he's the Potawatomi side of my family. His wife, my nana, she's the Cunningham Cherokee side of the family. So then, before my papa was my great grandma Edith, who she lived from 1901 to 2000,
And that
and
was his mother?
his mother,
Mhm.
and she was a student at the Chilocco Indian School and the Concho Indian Schools here in, well, not here, but in Oklahoma, northern Oklahoma for Chilocco. So yeah, her mother was an OG. Her mother was Lydia Christine OG, and she lived till 74, so passed just a couple years before I was born. And then the generation before that, that's where you see the OGs and the Bobians get together. So Robert Allen OG and Emily Antoinette Bobian were married, and this is where the family tree gets a little like mishy mashy because that generation, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there were like eight Bobians and eight OGs siblings that all got married, and I think there was some sort of attempt to consolidate or to preserve wealth, land. I'm not really sure exactly, and that's a story right there, of like how that all came about, because that doesn't just happen. Actually, I mean, maybe it does if you live in a really small town, but I think they were married. Um, well, they were born like around 1850. So they might have been married around like, 70 or something like that. I'm just looking to see if I can see when they were married because I have it pulled up. I thought you might ask me. And I don't see, but they were in Silver Lake. They were born in Silver Lake, Kansas. So by
Oh,
this
okay.
time they had been to Silver Lake, and this was where this kind of intermarriage of the two families started to happen. So the Bobians and the OGs are a story that goes together. Like if you have an OG ancestor, you likely have Bobian ancestry as well
Mhm.
because they brothers and sisters all just kind of married each other, and that must have been a heck of an arranged marriage situation. I don't really know like how that happened, and that's
Or survival, like it was really necessary.
it must have been necessary. I don't really know, but that's a story that would really be interesting to tell. And then there was Charles and Lydia Kennedy, and so Emily Antoinette's parents were Charles Henry Bobian. Um, he was born in Michigan and died in Bloomington, and so then prior to him, you get up to like John Baptiste, who's um, very French name kind of gives that away, and then Mark is listed as John Baptiste's brother,
Oh,
and I thought that he was um, Charles's brother for
right.
the longest time. And so, but I think maybe the story that I was thinking about is there's the story of the difference between Medore and Charles. And I still have to dig some more into that because there's kind of a contrast there as well with um, one side kind of taking the more traditional way of communal living and um, the traditional lifestyles, and then just fitting in with industry and capitalism and all of these things. And I think in my line, you're going to see a lot of people who are very industrious, who were very engaged in commerce, as I said, that with the ferries, and there was ice companies and all kinds of things that you can trace back in the family line. Um, so I see this sort of like walking in two worlds
Mhm.
a lot in my family tree. And a lot of times you see the kind of brotherly, um, maybe a little bit of brotherly competition, or just distinction, um, because one may be one way and one may be favoring another. So it's very interesting.
Yeah. I saw Medora Bobian on a street sign in Silver Lake.
Oh, yeah. Um, Medora, I think his descendants are prairie band, I think, and I don't want to misspeak, um, but he was more likely to choose the land in common, holding the land as
Uh-huh.
as a unit, where um, Robert Allen would or Charles would be more likely to say, I want my own land to defend,
Yeah.
and to to uh um so that no one can take it from me, kind of idea.
Yeah.
So it's
When
kind of
I was in Detroit, so I grew up in Detroit and but didn't really know anything about the history of it. I mean, we knew the name Pontiac, Cadillac, we had all those names, but Detroit's a lot older than Chicago. And then in Ann Arbor, there's the Burton collection at the University of Michigan. And between Detroit and the public library in Detroit and the Ann Arbor Burton collection, there are thousands of documents of the original founding of Detroit. And Bobian is everywhere. So I went in Caldwell's father founded Amherstburg, which is across the Detroit River from the city of Detroit. It's just a little bit south of Windsor. So, you know, I'm sure that they all came from that direction,
mm,
and these entrepreneurs just kept moving and finding new businesses to start and new towns to found. And so I'm convinced that you have a lot of records in Detroit too.
interesting. Well, I guess I have to plan a visit there.
I think you're
We
going to
have
be busy the rest of your life.
I think I will. Yeah, we have lots of relatives there, so
Well, and
um
I even wonder about the Bobian name coming further up the Lawrence Seaway, with
that's
that
possible.
French.
I think, let me see how far, because I'm looking at it right now and I'm just very
Oh,
interested in this. So let me see how far I can. Um, what's interesting is the um the tree that I have that I'm looking at right now. John Baptiste's parents are Joseph, and I don't speak French, Collier,
okay.
um, and
Is that
it's
Collier?
Cuierier,
Oh, pretty.
and who was a French immigrant. So um, that and he died in Monroe, Michigan. So
Hmm.
where's
Which is
Monroe?
just south of Detroit.
Okay, there you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. But like, where did the Bobian name hop in? Because like all some of the children are Bobian and some are. Lots of research is still required on that.
But this is how it goes.
Yeah,
We'll put this podcast out there, and other people have more piece of information. I'm sure they'll reach
hopefully,
out to you.
yes, hopefully they can reach out and help me help
Bobians across the world.
put this crazy family tree in line.
Well, it's really exciting, Alexa. I couldn't be more happy for you. I mean, to have that kind of heritage in the Chicago region is really unheard of. And it's a story that people here just need to know.
It means a lot to me. I love Chicago. I really didn't visit it until, it's been only in the last like 5 years, but I keep finding myself coming back and back and back. And I'll be back again this month. I'm coming back. So
You're
yeah.
always welcome to stay with me.
Oh, thank you very much. Between you and Sharon, I'm just like so well taken care of in Chicago. So thank you so much. And then also, other friends, my friend Sue Kessel took me around on last last weekend or whenever it was. Um, Took me all around and showed me all kinds of things, and was able to meet two other friends like just for a little meal. So I feel like I have so many friends, and it feels Chicago kind of feels like a small town to me now. It's
Yeah.
like I just know so many people there, and it's really, really cool to have that big of a community in a place that has just like so much going for it, and it's so massive, that I'm sure even those of you who live there have never really explored all of it, and it's just such a exciting proposition to be able to keep coming back and finding my favorite places, and I just love it.
Well, I want to thank you for the songs that you gave me permission to use in the Wilmette film that's coming up. Sharon's fifth great grandfather and grandmother, Archange and Antoine Wilmette. And I just think you're such a fascinating woman. You've got a garden going. Tell us everything that you're doing now.
Yeah, so my garden is a couple of things. My garden is outside where I now live in sort of a college town in a little neighborhood. And I have taken it from just grass and one maple tree to just like kind of a mess now, which is it's a nice mess. But I have tried to put all kinds of native plants and pollinator supporting plants out in the yard, and it's going really well. So I'm kind of rewilding my little spot that I have here in Emporia. I also have a nonprofit called Good Way Gardens, and Good Way Gardens is a both an educational garden space and a concert series. And all of this is happening on land that we have used in kind from the Lyon County History Center. So there was this piece of land that was sort of going unused, and the History Center directors were interested in seeing more things happen at the land. So they gave us permission to dig a garden. So we did, and to start producing the concert series, which is 3 years now in the making. So we have concerts on the first Sunday of the month. Our next one is this coming Sunday. It's also my oldest daughter's birthday, so it's going to be a very
Oh,
special one. And we will continue to do that on the first Sunday of the month through October. And our funding sources are very much up in the air, but we are working on replacing those and doing different things with them. So hopefully we'll be able to continue with the concert series next year, and build the organization to where this is no longer a volunteer job for me. That would be nice. And
yes.
yeah, and so that it's a job that I can pass on to someone else someday as well.
So you said it's a 501(c)(3). What's the website if people want to make a donation?
Yeah, it's not, we are not a 501, but we do have a fiduciary sponsor in the Emporia Community Foundation. So if you go to goodwaygardens.com, there's a link that will take you to the community foundation where you can make a deposit into that fund. And that's
Okay,
how we are supported. Mhm.
awesome. And what about your music? Every time I'm looking at your posts on Facebook, you're somewhere else playing a new song.
Yes, I have lots of stuff happening with that as well. The first single to my new album comes out on the 18th. So it's the album is called Stay Put, and the single is called Balin Hay. And so Stay Put is all about home. It's all about the places that have made me who I am, and the people that in those places. And it's a very roots oriented collection of songs. And I feel like Wanderlust, it was my last album, and it very much felt like sailing in a rocket ship. It was all of the really amazing electric instruments and the drums, and it just soared, and it went to all kinds of wild and wonderful places. And I feel like Stay Put is finding the excitement and the loveliness of being at home too, and kind of being um, whether it's remembering where the home that you came from. I put two songs that my nana sang to me as lullabies on this album, and they're kind of bookends to this little collection. And then Balin Hay is the first single, and it's about my grandpa who passed away just a couple years ago. And he was never a musician, but he was always really supportive of us kids as musicians and artists, and handed down lots of instruments that he bought and never played. And um, a couple of days after he passed, my mom asked me if I could, sing something, and I said absolutely not. I can't. I couldn't possibly do that. And pretty much as soon as I got off the phone with her, things started to come to me, and I had to just stop everything and run downstairs, and I wrote the whole song down within 15 minutes. And it means a lot to me to be able to share it, because I think that everyone knows someone like this. Everyone knows somebody um that was, the quiet hero that just kind of got stuff done. And I describe him as having tractor greasy grace on a lot of these publicity materials, because he always had that kind of like vague smell of some sort of hydraulic cleaner or something. I don't know what it was. He worked on he worked on uh, heating and air units. He was a pneumatic controls guy. Anyway, he was just a really handy man that always took care of others too. And so he had a big nurturing side, and I think it's a good um, tribute to him in a really personal way. But I think that some of those specifics are actually universal, and I feel like people are really going to identify with it. If you have a grandpa from the Midwest, you're going to hear it in this song. So, and then there's others that I'll just kind of point back to the roots. One of my the title track, which is maybe my favorite, is called "Stay Put," and it's about how it's hard to leave home, when you've got like uh, my lovely comfortable home with my sweet and kind boyfriend. I don't want to go away, like. So it's a little bit of an antithesis to the let's go everywhere wanderlust, and I feel like these are struggling. I have two wolves in me. One wants to go catch a plane somewhere, and one wants to sit on the couch and eat potato chips. So this is my potato chip eating side coming out.
I can totally relate to the two wolves. It's so funny that you mentioned that because I think after COVID, all I wanted to do was bust out of here.
Hmm.
And then this year, I feel like staying put. And
Hmm.
it's interesting, and maybe it's a reflection of, where we're kind of settling in the middle there and not settling, compromising why, just settling our souls,
Right.
down.
Yeah, and
And
I think it's important to have roots wherever you
mhm.
are. As much as I travel and as much as I go, I know where my roots are. And um, to me, Kansas is home and has been for nearly 20 years now. But Oklahoma is still my home. My roots are very much firmly planted still there. And so um, being able to kind of pay homage to all of this and talk about it all um, in a way that is um, kind of a memoir in a way. Like if you read it from my perspective, it really is kind of a little bit of a talking to about the places that I've been, and where I hope to be um, in the future as well. Just nice and rooted, and um, free to travel, but to know where my home is.
It certainly comes across, and I just love I love all your songs. Every one of them has meaning, and every one you can, if you listen to the lyrics, you can get a general idea, but just listening to you talk is really, really special. So I would encourage you to start your own podcast. I think
Oh,
people would really be interested in the stories behind your songs.
wow, thanks. Well, I'll think about it.
And one more
Let's
thing to
put
your
it on the
list.
list. Put it on the list of things for me to do.
Well, Alexa, thank you so much. I can't wait to hear your new album that's coming out. And um, as we kind of wind up here, any last thoughts about your heritage, your family, your inspiration for music, your goals for the future?
Well, before I forget, I will say that if you are interested in um, in the music and in the work that I'm doing, I do have a supporters network on Patreon. And so that's a way that you can support me directly. Patreon.com/Alexa Dawson. And that is where I leak all kinds of stuff, including the album before it comes out. It will be
Oh,
leaked
okay.
right over there. So, of course, you, Susan, will get a copy as soon as I can scoot it over to you.
We've
But
got a lot more movies we need music for.
yeah, great, good. Um, but I think I just got back from our doings in Oklahoma from Citizen Potawatomi Nation's Family Reunion Festival, and then I was able to also do some kind of private ceremony there. And upcoming is a commemoration of the Trail of Death, and they're commemorating it with a sculpture installation in Johnson County, Kansas. And so there's just so much going on, and like so many different ways that our history is living on. And yeah, I don't know what else to say other than like this is just such a wild ride, and I feel like all this history is worth telling, and especially as we kind of enter into this new era where no one really recognizes what's going on, and the country is changing so rapidly. Like I feel like these stories and these roots are worth going back to and revisiting, and because the lessons are there. We don't we look to our ancestors for those lessons, not to live the lives that they lived, but to live our own lives with the knowledge that they left for us. So I think passing that knowledge by without examining it puts us at a loss. So yeah, I just appreciate the opportunity to be involved with all this, and to have the fire lit a little bit brighter. So thank you, Susan.
Yeah, and all of us need to keep telling the story because there are ripples, and the younger generation will hear them, and
Yep.
they have to pick up the baton and keep running with it.
Yes, for sure.
Beautiful. So honored to know you, Alexa. Thank you, and I
Thank
look
you,
forward to
Susan.
seeing you again, whether it's me coming to Kansas or you coming here to Chicago.
Okay. Well, I hope to see you soon too.
Okay. Bye, dear. Thanks.
Bye bye.